Welcome everybody. And what you're going to hear about is a little bit of my motivation for standards-based grading and a bit of a work in progress. So we'll take some suggestions as to how to proceed, and I'll have some data for you maybe the next time we speak. So from Northeastern University, my motivation was it's pretty painful for students to get graded work back, even though I try really hard to be as fair as possible. And it's one of our least favorite parts of what we do, and yet it's necessary in terms of having standards. So that being said, the impressions on grading are somewhat varied over time, and these are the things that students say to me, and then later on I learn that this is part of what they're thinking. And I can understand it. And so I was starting to look for ways to do what we need to do in terms of assessing students and providing them with feedback, but just giving them numbers and seeing if they did okay wasn't quite meeting the objective for me, and that is guiding the students. And so that being said, I met these people at ASEE, and I thought, they were doing a workshop, which happened in the division I was a program director for, and they also did this awesome paper and some other works out there, and I thought, this might be what I'm looking for. I learned a lot from them in the process of helping them get set up to do this workshop, and also seeing their paper be reviewed. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to use this maybe in my simulation class, at least try it for now, but the real objective of this was to get into the capstone design course ultimately and see if we could make some valuable changes there. In the simulation course that I have been teaching for quite a while, which is where I started, I pretty much had this grade guide that you can see on the paper and on the right-hand side. And the grade guide was basically the instructions with numbers. And every now and then I'd ask if there was something insightful that the students did. And they were marginally satisfied with it, and I was marginally satisfied with it, and it took quite a bit of work to do that. But it still wasn't matching up with what I wanted to accomplish with the students and have them feel like this was a valuable part of what they're doing. Then, as I mentioned, I wanted to get into capstone design after simulation and really apply it, so finish up here. So what you're going to hear about is somewhat of the learning process of what I tried a little bit in simulation, how I got the students on board, and then how I may be using it as we move into capstone. So a little bit of apprenticing. I pondered quite a bit, so that's me on the bottom there, about how am I going to make this work. And I even started a couple of years ago evaluating how the students are assessed and researching some of that. So one of the things I did do in my early simulation course to get the students on board, and that's the students now thinking with me, is I asked them in a survey, among other things, what's the purpose of homework? That's 2 years ago. And then again, I asked the purpose of homework in 2016, but there was a little bit of an intervention. With what I've learned in standards-based grading and with some of the feedback from those two surveys, as you can see over here, I still have this view to moving this into capstone design. So what did I do with these purpose of homework questions? I asked in 2014 and again in 2016, what's the purpose of homework? And I got some open-ended answers that look like this, and this is partially how they've been organized. And my motivation there is learn what they thought of the homework and if they saw value in it, because this is what we're going to be grading. I learned some interesting things, which I'll share with you in a little while about those results. But, and I do apologize, this doesn't look the same on your screen as it does on mine. This should be one word, competencies only. I looked at the two ends of the continuum of just evaluating students on competencies, sort of the Montessori, have you accomplished this viewpoint. And then on the other end of the continuum, metrics only scoring, which is what I've been doing for the most part up to this point in time. So why did I go for it with standards-based grading? Because that seemed to be just right. And so that being said, I thought, yep, this is a pretty good fit. And with a little more investigation, I realized, yes, it's a good fit. And so I moved forward with the standards-based grading approach and trying to move that into my coursework. Now, I might be okay with it, but I need to make sure that the students are also understanding what we're trying to accomplish together. So the next thing was to try to get buy-in from the students, and I still wasn't getting it in 2014, 2015. So what I did in 2016, from some of the things I learned at ASEE, is I created the distinction or helped the students understand the distinction between formative and summative evaluation. And started with showing them this slide, that the homework you're getting back is for the most part formative. This is pretty much during the course, and it's low stakes. And then what you'll get at the end of the course, at the end of a project, or maybe in your exams, is what's called summative feedback. And I wanted them to not think that their formative feedback during the course was amounting to summative feedback, that they should use that to understand areas of weakness and understand areas that they're doing well in, and not just to put a number next to their name. So I tried, since there's a very varied types of learners in the class, I tried to also present this in a variety of ways. So that you saw the first slide, and this is at the beginning of my simulation course in 2016. So I highlighted for them that formative assessments, you can read it here, help you identify your strengths, target areas that need work, obviously weaknesses, helps me recognize where they may be struggling and how I can perhaps either help them individually or provide more clarity in the instructional process. And we look over here at summative. Very little formal learning is taking place when summative feedback is happening. Like I mentioned, end of project, quizzes and exams, more so exams. And it's characterized as an assessment of learning. And I like the way it says it's contrasted with formative assessment, which is assessment for learning. Something simple like this just gives them an idea of showing that there's progress happening, and summative assessment happens when, hopefully, when a goal is reached. And then here's another analogy: formative assessment when the chef tastes the soup, summative assessment when the guest tastes the soup. And it wouldn't be a Jaeger course without a cartoon. So even this one, I'm going to need more specific feedback on my formative assessments. And they started to understand what my goal was with homework and assignments and how they were being graded. Haven't done standards-based grading entirely yet, but at least now I'm getting some student buy-in. And finally, I used something from Angelo and Cross, just a reference all the way back to 1993. I showed them this as well, that formative is for the process, for the improvement process, and summative is really the evaluation, and that I do very little summative process in the middle of the course, so that they can see that as an ongoing process for them to improve. So what did I do? And this isn't very scientific, but as I look back, you can see the order of elements here. I talked about the purpose of homework survey in 2014. That was just information for me. And then also I'll show you the teacher rating and course evaluation. That's what TRACE stands for, from 2014 for one element of the course. Then I did the formative summative clarification in the same course 2 years later, similar population of students, similar age, similar background as far as coursework. But I did that clarification at the beginning of the course. Then I did the purpose of homework survey shortly after that. I started to use some standards-based grading in the simulation course. Not full on, because the capstone course was my real goal, and it was a little bit easier to start at the beginning of capstone. And then we can look at the course ratings again for TRACE. But you might be wondering, what were the results from 2014 to 2016? And so here's the 2014 purpose of homework survey, and I'll just call your attention to a couple of elements, and this was before standard-based grading and before the formative summative clarification. They thought 18% of the responses, not of the students, but 18% of the responses thought it was for me to provide and enter grades. And just to clarify how they responded, these were open-end responses. So if I had 33 students, I could conceivably have 101 responses for which to do a context analysis on. So provide and enter grades. A bit concerning that they thought that. Exam prep. They thought that's why we do homework, to get ready for the exam. And unfortunately, the whole concept of reflection and awareness wasn't even in there. We looked down at understanding and familiarization. I'm pretty happy to see that, 18% of the responses included some form of that, and some guidance and feedback on areas of weakness. 11% of the responses addressed that. Then here, between about 8 and 11%, we have what we had expected, what we would hope to do: further learning, practice, affirmation, and application. So trying to maybe eliminate some of those or minimize some of those red areas and keep the guidance and feedback area strong. Then I did talk about formative and summative, and you can see here we're going to do a quick comparison of what we've learned. So right up here, before the introduction, after the introduction, and these questions weren't directly after, they were a few days later. But what you can see is, as far as the percentages go, the concept of exam prep was no longer primary in their minds. And we did get a little bit of reflection and awareness. Here, each of these has gone up from practice, affirmation, application, and the guidance and feedback on areas of weakness. And I tried not to use these exact words, informative and summative, but some of them were used, and they've been parroting it back. But if we look now at just 2016, after formative and summative introduction, you can see that exam prep and providing answer grades is low, as we saw in the previous slide, and practice, affirmation, reinforcement are still strong and even a little bit stronger. And then guidance and feedback on areas of weakness is quite a bit stronger than it was before I gave that introduction to them. So I've clarified the process of why we have these assignments and why we have homework and what we're trying to achieve. And with that, I'm now going to fold in more standards-based grading, maybe not with this population, but as this population, maybe not with this population in simulation, but as they move into their senior capstone design, we can work a little bit more on standards-based grading. So I don't know how scientific you regard this, because it doesn't really seem like it's significant, but you can see here from our trace, fall 2014, the instructor fairly evaluated my performance, and fall 2016, the instructor fairly evaluated my performance. And what we see in each of these, here we go, is a 4.6. This is for me. These are for the other cohorts that teach that same population. And then here, the 4.9, that's for me, and 4.2 is the other cohorts who teach that population. So it wasn't just that they got more generous. So I don't know if we can really draw many conclusions, but we can say nowadays it's trending. And so as we finish up with the application of understanding formative and summative to a small degree, introducing that in two similar courses, I think the students are on board and a little bit more open to the concept of homework and assignments and what the grades are for and what the feedback is for. And there's going to be more to come in terms of
great. Thanks, Kris.
Go ahead.
I have one question that came from our standards-based grading forum quite a while ago that maybe you can elaborate on, but basically just how have students been responding to standards-based grading? So you elaborated a lot that they understand that they gain more feedback. Do you see that this is something that they're preferring, that you use in your course to evaluate them?
Right, that's a good question. And I've only done a handful of assignments with standards-based grading as I started to gear up in simulation. And I did do it in capstone. And they seem more responsive to it because it's mapped more to descriptors and competencies for them. So they seem more accepting, but I haven't really gathered data on that Like I said, I'm pretty much getting geared up, but I didn't get those. I'm getting fewer of those comments that you saw in those speaking bubbles and thought bubbles about, where did I lose points. They're asking questions a little bit more like, how can I improve, or what would bring this up to a portfolio quality, whatever the terminology that we're using, the higher levels. They're wanting to be the quality student as opposed to just get the high grade and wonder where they lost points. So I might be able to collect some more data on that in a little bit more formal way, but I'm definitely feeling that they're more accepting of the feedback that they're getting. And that is evidenced by the amount of questions that I get after that when students come and bring their papers to me and say, where did I lose points, or I did everything on the checklist. I'm getting less of that. I did in my simulation course.